So, I mean, it's interesting that you pointed out that Trump's threats did not work with Iran. You also said that it is unlikely to work with Iran because Trump, from the early days of the war, he had issued repeated threats. He said, "I will hit you 20 times harder. I'm going to erase the civilization. I'll hit the power plants, etc., etc. Open the strait." But nothing has happened. The Iranians haven't opened the strait at all. So, logically speaking, at least somebody in the administration must be realizing that this approach of threatening Iran is not actually working with Iran. But at the same time, the United States is also not ready to make any meaningful concessions to Iran. So is it all because of Israel?
Let me roll back to when President Trump scuttled the Obama deal. And at the time, this is 2015, when Obama was working out the deal, a number of Israeli generals at the time said, "We do not want an Iran deal. Why not? We would prefer to have Iran refining uranium towards weapons. We would rather it going to get a weapon, a nuclear weapon, than to lift sanctions on Iran." And their logic was very clear. They said, if we lift sanctions on Iran and limit the nuclear program, Iran's going to get rich. It's going to begin to export 4 or 5 million barrels of oil a day. And it's going to become much more powerful. And it's going to be able to fund its allies, whether it's Hezbollah or Assad in Syria. And that's going to hurt Israel in the long run more than this rush towards a nuclear weapon. And the Israeli general said, once it gets close to a nuclear weapon, we can bomb Iran. And we have to remember that Israel had bombed Saddam Hussein's nuclear enrichment plants. It bombed Syria's nuclear enrichment plants. So Israel figured we can bomb those plants. And it got the promise from every American president that America would not allow Iran to enrich towards a nuclear weapon, that America would stop it, would bomb it before doing that. So that was the fateful choice. And President Trump sided with Israel on this against President Obama and said, we'd prefer to bomb Iran than to lift sanctions. And now we're at a situation where he bombed Iran. And Prime Minister Netanyahu convinced him, after 7 meetings in Washington and so forth, convinced him this is the time to do it. You can do it. You're going to be a hero. We took down Hezbollah against everybody's predictions because we're technologically superior. We've got better intelligence. We can do this in Iran. And President Trump threw in his cards with Netanyahu, and he tried it. Now we bombed. And we didn't get regime change, but we, of course, have rubbished the nuclear facilities. But the problem is, this leaves us in a situation, it leaves Israel in a situation where it's going to have to mow the lawn. And this is what Israel has done in places like Gaza, Lebanon, Syria. It can beat back what it sees as enemy regimes, but it can't completely destroy them. It hasn't eliminated Hamas. It hasn't eliminated Hezbollah. It hasn't eliminated fundamentalism in Syria. So it's going to bomb every several years in order to weaken those countries and keep them from organizing against Israel. And that's what it's getting locked into in Iran. The trouble is, Iran is a country the size of Western Europe. It's 100 million people. It's on a whole different order than taking on Hamas. And that's why Israel is so concerned about regime change in Iran. And if Trump abandons this effort at regime change in Iran now, Israel, it will hurt Prime Minister Netanyahu. And it'll hurt Israel. So Israel is determined to push this forward, whereas Trump is trying to backpedal. On the other hand, he's not going to break with Israel. If Trump has one firm strategy, it is his attachment to Israel. Really, the United States and Israel are attached at the hip. In the electoral cycle, the amount of donations from pro-Israeli mega donors is fundamental to the Republican Party, to American politics in general, not just the Republican Party, the Democratic Party as well. And we see this with Biden. we see this with Trump, that they are not going to part ways with President Netanyahu, with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And that leaves him in a real, it leaves Washington in a real bind, because it's very unpopular with the United States. It's hurting us economically, and it's putting us in our debt is just growing hand over fist.
But in the United States, you still see now opposition towards Israel coming even from the right flank of the Republican Party, which was unthinkable until a few years ago. The left was always
all of those, you have to recognize that all of those people who are pushing back on the right have been deplatformed, right? They've been pushed off all the news programs. They cannot, none of them can be interviewed. They can't be interviewed by the major think tanks. The Heritage Foundation tried to interview, one or two of them, and it caused havoc within their top ranks, and were accused of anti-Semitism and so forth. So yes, there are those voices on the right wing that are speaking from the wilderness and railing against this odd relationship between Israel and the United States, and saying it's bad for America, it's going to bankrupt us, and it's losing us all our important allies. But that criticism has not made its way into mainstream. There are a few congressmen and women who are speaking out against this relationship, but they're on the very margins of America. It's not clear that they're going to get any real headway. We've seen this before in American politics, and the people have projected, America and Israel are parting ways, and they haven't done so. So I think it's too early to predict that this wave of criticism, which has grown up because of, in this extreme moment of war, is not going to just sink back under the waves once the war settles down. And, the stock market is booming. American economy has remained resilient, despite many people predicting that this war could push the international community into a recession. And yet the stock markets have rallied because there's still a lot of oomph in the economy. So all these doomsday sayers who say that this is the straw that's going to break the camel's back, I'm afraid there's still, the camel can still take a few more straws here.
Yeah. Interesting.